Okay, there we go.
And Eddie, just a quick thought. If you make me a co-host, I can address any, you know, if somebody jumps in and they're not muted, I can mute them, that kind of situation.
Yeah. Do you know how we go about that?
Yeah, if you go to participants and go over my name, there should be a more option. And if you click on more, you can make me a co-host.
Brilliant. Thank you. All right. Can y'all see? All right. Let's start my timer. Great. So at the moment, that's the title I have for my dissertations. Conversations about race with white teacher candidates. And I use teacher candidates because I think it's something that the general public understands as a term. These are students who are looking to become teachers. As I go along, I may use the term pre-service teachers. That's the term that we use in the field. These are just students who are wanting to become teachers, and they come to a college of education, a teacher education program. So I just want to make that point real quick on the front. So just an overview of the presentation. I'm going to first provide some context of the problem, what's happening. Then lay out the principal argument of my research. What is it that I'm trying to get across? And then I'll go through each article. Again, this dissertation is made of 3 separate articles, all connected with one central theme, and I'll go through that. And at the very end, just kind of wrap things up, bring things together, and make those connections. So the context here. So the majority of teachers in the United States are white and female and come from middle class. Meanwhile, most of our students, or at least more than half of the students, are non-white. Now, that in itself is not an issue, but what we happen and what we observe and what we see is a big racial and cultural divide that plays out into inequitable teaching and learning. So, I don't know if you remember that old film, Kindergarten Cop, from back in the day, where Arnold Schwarzenegger goes in to be a kindergarten teacher, and he's just a mess. He doesn't know what to do. And I use that image because I think it helps kind of prime the thinking. And it's a little comical. Unfortunately, the impact is a little bit more serious than that movie. But what we have here are young white female teachers going to teach in classrooms in neighborhoods that they never even thought about thinking and teaching. Let alone these are very challenging circumstances and some of these neighborhoods being under-resourced. And so as you can read, a lot of these teachers leave. And if they don't leave, what we observe is a lot of blame. They'll blame the students or the parents or the culture of the students as to why they're not learning. So what's happened is, as a field in teacher education, we said, hey, there's an issue here, there's a problem. Our teachers need to know more about our students, the different cultures they come from, what racial experiences they have, what are their language. And for these pre-service teachers to, in a certain kind of way, imagine a world where white and whiteness is not the dominant identity, where you have students from all different parts of the world or just a different part of culture, and getting students to appreciate that difference, recognize that difference, and then be able to connect that to larger social political issues. I'll get to that in just a moment, what I mean by that. But in a nutshell, help the white teachers teach all children in an equitable way. But here's the problem. So these teacher candidates come to teacher education. We're like, hey, they need some teaching on race and racism and how it transpires in the classroom. Great, let's go do this. So for the last several decades, we've been doing this as a field in teacher education. But we get what's called resistance, which is at the core of what I study and why I investigate. And there's 4 main types of resistance that you see, and I categorize them there, right? The disengagement. So they won't talk about race. They'll just say everything's about a class issue. Or they just don't engage at all. They don't participate. They don't say anything. The one that probably irritates most people is like, well, we had a black president. Like, how can we be a racist country, right? And then the last one is seeing racism as an individual issue, right? It's just like, oh, that person is treating that person unfairly, versus saying, hey, why is it that Flint still doesn't have drinking water for the kids? And why is, I mean, would that happen in a suburban in Okemos, where we're at now, right? And some of these affluent neighborhoods? Probably not. Well, there's a structural issue, right? There's racial issues involved there. And it's not just an individual issue. So as you go, I'm going to explain the study, but before I explain the study, I want to give the argument of the study and the takeaway here, and then I'll go and break everything down. So we're kind of starting from the end, if you will. So my basic argument here is we have to reprioritize and rebalance the intellectual development of pre-service teachers with their emotional maturity, right? So being a great teacher is not just knowing your pedagogy, how to teach math, how to teach literacy, what are the right moves, but also having that emotional capacity to listen, to ask questions, to connect with your students, to empathize, to have patience. And that's an emotional intelligence. And I think if we're really committed and want to see better outcomes, I think we need to teach, particularly white pre-service teachers, how to keep their cool, if you will, how to de-escalate and have a sense of awareness about the work and what they're going into and their own presence and their own identity and who they are and what they're coming into the classroom. Okay. In other words, and I say this because we think as we feel and we feel as we think. And that's in part why I'm putting this emphasis on emotional discipline, if you will. This is probably one of my favorites. I'm going to take a time here to enjoy this one. René Descartes, the famous French philosopher. I think, therefore I am. And then a favorite teacher of mine, a self-proclaimed mystic. And he calls Descartes kind of the intellectual hangover from the West. And there's a flip. Instead of I think, therefore I am, it's actually I am, therefore I think. And the idea there is to say we're human beings, not human thinkings. And emotions and how we feel are part of it. Just trying to hammer the point home here. So how does this break out? What's your evidence here? Eddie, we're not here just to hear your opinion. We can do that another time. So the way the dissertation is broken down is 3 pieces. First, my own reflective story, and I'll connect that in just a second. Then I wanted to look at how other disciplines talked about resistance. How did they take it up? How do they categorize it? How do they explain it? And then lastly, I wanted to ask and learn what other teacher educators thought about resistance in a critical multicultural education class. What are teacher educators saying when they're talking about racism and the students pushing back or they're being silent? How do they take that up and how are they making sense of this? Okay, so I'm going to start backwards here. What do the teachers educators say? And I wanted to know a couple things. First, I wanted to know, as teachers of these classes where you're talking about race and racism, what did you want to get across? How did you go about teaching, having these conversations? If any of you have ever had conversation about race or racism, it's easily really heated. It's a tenuous topic. And then just overall, how are they making sense of this behavior when students disengage or become silent or say, hey, Obama was president, we're good? How does the teacher educator respond in that situation? So I'm going to share some of the things that came out. I can't share everything. There's quite a bit. So I'm going to share what I think is most pertinent to the main argument here, that we have to rebalance the preparation of pre-service teachers, the teacher candidates. So one of my participants, who I call here Siti, she came into graduate program and she was all about critical pedagogy. That was the thing. That's what I'm focused on. My dissertation was going to be on critical pedagogy. And she started teaching this critical multicultural education course. Sometimes it's called social foundations as well. And she said that she had to give it up. She realized critical pedagogy wasn't enough. It was great because you can help the intellect, ask great questions, criticize the world, ask good questions. But for her in teaching this class, it didn't work. She's an international instructor, so she's not from the US. She's also a woman. And she told of a story. And one time, one of the students came up to her after class and said, "You can't teach this class. You're not you're not qualified enough." Now, I will argue to claim that a student probably wouldn't do that to a male instructor, and definitely not an instructor who's white. It's just kind of beyond the pale, if you will. But being that she's female and international, and I would also add somewhat of an accent, the relationships are a little different. The power structure is different. So what she do, she used art to get the students to open up. She's had the students write poems about their frustration. She had presentations at the end of class to help. And she also incorporated writing a lot more and exit tickets as a way to connect with them, to help her connect with them, not from an intellectual, how do I want to say this, or a pure knowledge base, but really getting to know who they are. And I think more importantly, if I may infer, for the students to get to know her. And so she talked about this bringing of arts into it to help supplement critical pedagogy. She loved it, but she recognized the limits, and she felt like there was this whole other emotional piece that she needed to get to. Another theme was these instructors all use their personal lives and stories to connect with the students and open up. So the first quote there is from a Latina instructor. As you can see, she goes back and forth in her language. And for her, she's like, I want my students to see me. I want them to see my culture because I want to connect with them. And she talked about bringing her stories as an ELL student and the way she provided instruction so they could see how this all ties into practice. And then another instructor at the bottom, which a white instructor, she also talked to her students who are majority white, said, I'm still learning this. I still make mistakes, but I own them, I admit them, and I try to figure out how to be better. And she talked about that as a way to help students not feel so threatened by saying what they actually feel and being able to talk through some of these issues. Oh, sorry. There we go. And the last one with professional development. This one I pulled straight from research because I really think it makes the point. It is super difficult as an instructor to sit there to talk about race and hear racist things being said. And how do you go navigating that conversation in the way that the student feels like they're being heard and valued and their thinking is they're contributing to the conversation, but at the same time being able to ask questions in a certain kind of way that will help expand someone's awareness and say, hey, there's other experiences to this world, there's other experiences to this country, there's other experiences to this county. And what does that mean? And being able to keep everything in the classroom at a certain degree so that it doesn't get out of hand. And unfortunately, we're absent of that professional development, both in terms of regulating emotions, but also pedagogically. What methods are you using so that we can have a healthy conversation about race and racism in the United States? And again, this is the whole idea that this is more than logic. And here I actually borrow from one of our great professors in the College of Education, Abner Segal. And, this is not just the fact that white pre-service teachers don't have information about race and racism. To a certain extent, they do. They watch films, they watch movies, they have a certain influence about it, right? So when we have these classes and they break down, they say no, they say, you're not qualified to teach this class. That's a recognition that this is more than just information. There's something else at hand here. And just having them read more articles isn't going to necessarily give us the outcome we need. Okay, I want to take a quick questions real quick. If anybody has any. All right. Going once. Going twice. Okay. Dr. Falam, can I carry on?
Maybe give it just a couple more beats, but this would be an opportunity for folks who are joining us, non-committee members, to ask any questions about this particular part of Eddie's study where he interviewed teacher educators who taught critical multicultural education courses and strategies kind of they employed, right? I think that was a pregnant and pause.
Okay.
So if you would like to move on to your second paper, that'd be fine.
For sure. So just as a summary, to kind of give you a layout. So we're teaching white pre-service teachers about race, and then they show resistance, right? Whether that means silence, they're not saying anything, whether they're completely or thinking of race as just an individual issue and not structural. The field of teacher education primarily sees that this is an issue of them not getting the ideas of what is being communicated in the in the readings. They feel like, okay, they're resisting because they don't want to say, yes, white privilege exists. And as a consequence, the field up until now pretty much says, okay, let's give students more readings and let's give students service learning opportunities. Service learning opportunities, there's a lot of evidence to show it's positive, it needs intentionality, but there's a lot of great outcomes. And literature is what I'm getting at here. I think that's one part of the piece, but again, I think we're missing another part. So to me, if you look at the gentleman there at the corner in yellow, it's like there's more to this story. I think there's more to this. So then I said, let's look at how other disciplines take up this idea of resistance. How do they interrogate and make sense of it? So I'm going through my readings and looking at how other different disciplines make sense of this, and I've come up with 4 categories. Resistance in the physical science, resistance in political science, resistance as behavioral, and resistance as transformation. So, in the physical science, I know some of you are already getting headaches just by seeing variables. I won't stay on this too long. But essentially, in physical science, a lot of resistance is talked about electricity, right? So if electricity is flowing and there's a lot of resistance, it's going to slow down. If there's little resistance, the electricity is going to move through. And resistance is not seen as a good or bad thing. It just depends on how you need to mitigate it. Sometimes we want a lot of resistance so that the transistor does not blow up. And so you want resistance. In other cases, no, we need more amps. We need more electricity coming through. So you try to way to reduce the resistance. And I use this because I think instead of thinking of resistance as a good or bad thing, I think we need to see a resistance as an expected phenomenon, expected behavior, and learn to leverage it, guide it, facilitate it, and mitigate. Okay, we need more. We need more conversation here. Where can we be more critical here? Or, hey, let's bring this down a notch. Let's bring the temperature down here a little bit, and let's mitigate it. Then there's political. I use these images to show that political resistance, it depends on your viewpoint if it's good or bad. On my left, you have the January 6th insurrection. On the right, Black Lives Matter. And I purposely picked that photograph that stuff's burning. I obviously acknowledge that there was more to that movement than that. But I used that picture to show the contrast. Some people say political resistance is good. The problem with that is that what is politically good depends on your belief systems. But just to say that resistance is also talked about in a political context. Okay, so with me so far, just to pause, right, so we've done 2 of the 4 categories. We got the sciences, we got the political. Now I want to go to the behavioral. So when we talk about resistance, people bring up cognitive dissonance a lot. Even my participants talked about cognitive dissonance. But there's a couple other things that I want to highlight. This idea of emotional fragility that's kind of coming up now more so in the mainstream conversation with Robin DiAngelo's book. And this idea of fear. And I put that quote in there because I think it really summarizes what the challenge is here, right? Maintain the current identity and selfhood, right? Because when we're asking students to think, talk, and reflect about race, for some of them, and maybe like, oh man, maybe this is a racist country. Oh man, maybe I shouldn't say that joke at the bar. Or maybe those friends I'm hanging out with, actually they do have racist ideas. And so that's gonna be a clash to who they are in the world and how and where they're going and what to wear. And so it's more than just saying this idea is right or wrong, but there's a whole identity shift that's happening. And people prefer to resist that change than engage in it. Okay, so now we're going to the 4th one, the transformative piece. And here I rely a lot on Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. I highly recommend this book. And I use it because I think it's just a nice framework. I think a lot of other people do similar work as Dr. Joe Dispenza. People talk about heart-mind coherence. But the idea here is that there's a mechanistic process that happens when we go about change. What do I mean by that? So let's say I'm gonna want to start getting in shape and run and so forth. I'm gonna have discomfort. It's gonna come up. Or, like in this case, I'm hearing things that are new to me, I don't understand, and are challenging who I am or how I believe. And so part of transformation is recognizing that discomfort and being able to move it. And Dr. Joe Dispenza takes it to a very detailed level. Again, that's why I encourage you to read it. But he says our minds are our subconscious. So everything that's running on the subconscious mind is stored in the body. I believe there's another book called The Body Keeps the Score, right? So all of our experience and our programming is in the body. So anytime you try to think differently, be differently, behave differently, the body's going to kick up and say, hey, what's going on here? This is against the program. What are you doing here? And so then his take is you have to get beyond the analytical mind, discipline the body to change the program. That's where the book comes in handy and goes into the details of it. But the reason I bring this up here is to create some sense of empathy, if you will, compassion, to the experience that some of these students are going through. They're 19, 20 years old. Maybe they lived in the suburbs the whole time. Chappelle's Show might be the most they know about other cultures, right? That's an oversimplification, but at the same time, we do have students that come from limited experience. And so knowing how transformation happens, I think that would be helpful to us to help students move through this discomfort. As one of my participants said, to be able to sit in the discomfort but not stay in it. And recognize that's part of the process of transformation. And this quote I love, again, it's from someone else in the field, and I'm actually going to read it because I think it really captures my sentiment. Whenever we ask students to question their identities, and we consider, move this so I can read this, and we consider how they understand themselves and their relation to others, we are stepping on highly sensitive and emotionally charged terrain. In effect, we're asking students to take a personal risk that can threaten deeply held cognitive, psychological, and emotional investment in forms of identity and relations of belonging. Again, this is more than just seeing the world differently. This is reworking how you see yourself, your relationships, and who you decide to spend time with. And reconsider some of your relatives. At times that happens. Okay, make sure I got that right. Okay, questions. And Dr. Fanal, you need to let me know if I'm going too fast, too slow, if we just right. If I may ask him such a favor.
You're right on track. No,
okay.
Right on track. And if there are questions about the conceptual portion of Eddie's dissertation, this would be a good time. What we can also do, though, is wait until the third paper and just kind of open up for general questions as well. So if there's something about a specific paper or overall questions that people have, we can get into that. But we might give it a couple seconds here to see if folks had questions about this specific.
Cool. So, as we're giving time to that, a summary. So I'm talking to these teacher educators. They're the ones who teach in this class. And all of them are telling me, hey, I have to talk about my experience as a person to connect with these students. I have to bring art to help open them up. I have to explain how this came out in my practice. And in that way, they're able to talk about some of these issues. And I think it helps students as well. Because I remember one student talking about how she was in high school, and I believe this was in Tennessee, and they had to make their black friends in the trunk of the car go under, not be seen because they were going to a certain part of town. And that was a very pivotal story for the other students to hear, to say, oh, wow, that kind of racism is still alive and exists in the United States. And I think that's what happens, too, with the instructors when they bring their own lived experience. As a black instructor, what did you have to face? And connect that with the students' lives. And I think the teacher educators, without saying it, they're talking about, again, this emotional piece of transformation. How do you move through that discomfort and realizing that these students, it's not that they don't know, not to say that we all can't know more, but that this process is requiring more from them, not just intellectually, but really in their spirit and who they are and how they think of themselves. Let's the kind of try to bring this together one more time here. All right. So I think the other part of bringing this now is to my story, and my story is why I started thinking about this a little deeper, because it wasn't adding up because of my own story. And that's why I think it takes more than the right political beliefs. It takes character. And so I went for undergrad, University of San Francisco, Jesuit University, educating minds and hearts that change the world. I took sociology of education. I remember reading Peter McLaren, The Emancipatory Education, and I was there. Going into my master's degree, I would consider myself, social justice or educator. I specifically went to a program that was focused on urban education, and specifically urban education and social justice. And so I was at the University of Pennsylvania, and I was in the program, and I was ready. I was gung ho. I was moving through everything, and this was in North Philadelphia. But it didn't play out the way I intellectually thought. I had a lot of trouble. So between September and December of my first year teaching, I had 4 fights, of which there was blood on the wall in one of them. I was angry, frustrated. I would blame the students, their culture, and it didn't make sense to me. I was like, these students should be here, ready to learn. They should have their supplies. Where are the parents? Just up the wall about this whole thing. And I was only looking at what they weren't bringing in. Keep in mind, these are 6th and 7th graders. And so a lot of my behavior was what the literature says about what happens with white pre-service teachers when they get into the classroom. And so here I'm not white. Here I'm believing in social justice, but I'm still behaving like the white pre-service teacher. So what's happening? So December comes, I have a break, and I just decided to chill out. And from there, I think I was just tired. And I said, I can't get worked up like this because I can't be coming home like this every day. It's just too much. And I had this kind of spiritual renaissance moment. So that's to everyone on the call, that's where all my spirituality interests came from a group of middle school kids. And they woke me up. And I realized that I had to prioritize relationships, that it wasn't just about making sure that they're all in their seated assignment at a specific time. And a lot of things that you think what teaching is, it's really not. It's being able to crack a joke in the hallway so they can get in, and having those moments with with students. So I started reading Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching, 81 verses, highly recommend. In the morning, I'll wake up, I'll read a verse, read the application of it, and then get on the train, and then walk for an hour to get to the school. And this is what got me through. I just relaxed. I had a lot less behavioral issues. I still had some. I didn't have any more fights. I had relationships with my students. We were learning. Things were progressing. I was going home happy, so that was good. And I was overall becoming a better teacher. Far from perfect, but definitely a lot better than I was. And I realized by the time of my end of my second year, I realized I really enjoy teaching. I love the kids. The adults and the systems really is what's getting in the way here. Even my more quote unquote problematic students, you get better. You get easier. You realize not to take it personally. And again, going back to this idea of emotional discipline, emotional awareness, and emotional intelligence. And I think that needs to be instilled in our teacher candidates. And if you don't know, Lao Tzu is also, if you've heard, A Journey of 1,000 Miles begins with one step. That's Lao Tzu, a Chinese philosopher. That's my plug. And I think this is what happened to me, and this is what I learned, right? Power is not about controlling others. It's really about having discipline over yourself. And I think I tie that back into, some pictures. I thought you all may want to see this. And I think Mr. Lopez, who's in the picture on my far left, he was critical to my development and just checking in with me. We went to the same master's program. And that was actually a ceremony. Every Saturday, we took a group of our students, our 7th graders, seventh graders, and they took a computer class at Villanova. And so the Saturday morning, wake up 9, get on the train, go to Villanova, and then we'll have breakfast. And then they started their computer classes there with some students. And that was the ceremony there at the end. And then the pictures on the top, I put those in there because I would have never had that happen in my first year. I wanted control. That's just not in control. That's my picture of the second year. The students were seated wherever they want. They were working on a science project, and everybody got everything done. There was no disturbances. But as a first year teacher, like, what's the control? Particularly in that environment where, and I did this in the beginning, you yell at the students. I was trying to yell at the students to control them because other male teachers were doing that. They just laughed at me because they're like, this is not you. So they just laughed. So that only made me more mad. So it was a bad scene. But you learn who you are. And then again, that whole relationship piece. And that was my second year. It was, again, challenges still, but just very different, vastly different. And then the woman, my right, Gail Cantor, she was my classroom mentor, a Jewish woman in the middle of North Philly with Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, and teaching them Yiddish, and then teaching them words. That was my experience. So, summary to close here. So again, the field at the moment says, okay, these students are resisting because they don't want to say white privilege exists. And if we get them to admit that white privilege exists, that whiteness exists, that the belief in meritocracy, if we get them to believe that through literature and service learning, that means that teaching is going to be more equitable. That means brown and black kids are going to learn at a better rate. That's the current kind of thinking. Now, I'm not the only one in this. There's other people pushing back, but this is what I want to reposition the conversation, if you will. That this resistance is not necessarily about white privileges, acknowledging that or not, but the resistance coming from an ask for them to shift an identity of who they are themselves and in the world and their relationships. And to do that, I think, yes, it takes literature. Yes, it takes service learning. But I also think it takes emotional awareness to not resist conversations that you may disagree, but know how to move through that discomfort, make yourself aware of other lived experience, and take in other ideas. And more importantly, once you get into the field, to have the maturity to be calm, to treat every child with dignity and respect, and know that it's your professional responsibility to de-escalate and be the mature person in that situation. And I tell my teacher candidates this, parents, even the school secretary, principals, whatever, they all can make your job harder. And they, in certain cases, they will. But it's your responsibility to figure out the adjustment and how to adapt and make it work. As soon as you resort to blame, you're done. Because you resolve yourself with the responsibility to make an adjustment. But a lot of that, it takes a certain emotional, as I said, maturity and character. So with that, I thank you. I appreciate everyone's time. And I'm eager to entertain any and all your questions.
Thank you, Eddie. We will allow for, at least a few questions if there are some from non-committee members. This would be a time for them to either raise their hand. I might be able to see that if I catch them correctly. Maybe it might help, Eddie, if you stop sharing the screen, and then I'd be able to see if anybody raise their hand, or if there's something already on someone's mind, you can feel free to just unmute yourself and jump right in.
I can get us started. So Eddie, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your shift from being a classroom teacher to a teacher educator, and what was that shift like for you in this understanding of control and what you learned about being a teacher to, helping people become teachers?
So I think I became a great teacher educator because of the mistakes I made in the middle school classroom. I often tell this story where a former student comes up to me at the end of class. This was here at State, And he goes, Eddie, thank you for a great semester. Thank you. A white male student's like, thank you for a great semester. I was like, oh yeah, absolutely, yeah, great, da da da, that type of thing. And he's like, I know, I never knew what we were gonna do, but we were always gonna do something, right? And so so the idea there, I think, was for me, I knew I had to connect with the students. In the beginning, as a classroom teacher, I wasn't connecting to the students. Those students were just a path to my identity as a quote unquote social justice educator. I didn't really care about their lives. I just wanted to be the next Jaime Escalante, if you will, right? I wanted to be that great teacher. And, but then you realize, okay, they're not here for me. And getting through some of these egoic ideas. And from that, okay, I have to connect with them. I have to listen to them. I have to build a relationship. And so by the time I got into teaching this class, that was already instilled. But I think the thing that I think made the difference, I'm inferring here, so if you can allow me some wiggle room here. But in my conversation with my colleagues, frustrated for good reason, I think at times there was tinges of blame that was going on. These students, those students, and a lot of that language is what we don't want our pre-service teachers to say about the students they teach, right? And so I felt like, ooh, this is dicey here. And there was also this idea that our job was to get them to believe X, Y, and Z. And I'm still kind of interrogating that. I think that still needs to be developed for a host of different reasons. But for me, it was like, I don't need you to believe X, Y, and Z. But what I do need you to know is how that person is taking up this issue, why they're taking up the issue, how are they citing that decision? How is that person to take up this issue? And the reason I did that is because I wanted to bring down the resistance, right? As soon as you tell someone, and I know that, and my mother reminds me of this, as soon as you tell someone this is what you got to do, the less likely they want to do it, right? And so my take on that was like, okay, I need a way for them to see the conversation at the very least. You can hold on to what you got, but you need to see these other conversations and know why they believe that and what are they basing their beliefs on. And same thing with you. Do you have those beliefs because you and your family watch Fox News, or are you taking these beliefs out of your own, metacognitive decision? But I don't think I get there if I didn't have this importance on emotions. I think that shocked me so much in the beginning that after that, so much of my world became about emotions and energy and vibration, if you will, the new age conversation. And so for me, it was like, okay, I need them to engage critically, but to a certain extent, I want to keep the peace. And I think that allowed me to get to some of these other thoughts. Great question.
Someone else, feel free to jump in with a question if there are any.
Sure, so I'll go ahead. So Eddie, one of the things that I love about, I guess, the fact that you're a teacher educator, but you're also a practitioner in the field now, how does the work that you've done from these studies actually inform the work that you're doing now with people who aren't necessarily the folks who know all of the knowledge that you know and being able to get that work across to them?
Cool. And my supervisor's on the call too, so let me get this right. So I think one of the big things, at least at work right now, we have a big push in equity. And we want our peers, our colleagues, what we call student support coordinators, to see racism and racial injustice as a structural issue. And we've had challenges with that. We have different initiatives. We have consultants come in and we talk about race. We've had quite a fair bit of success, if I may say so. But we also experience resistance. We say, oh, there's pushback, right? And so for me, when I hear that, I always think back about what these studies are saying in terms of like this is a shift in identity. In terms of my experience teaching this class, saying, okay, maybe not tell them what to think, but tell them the different beliefs. And where does those beliefs take you? Right? So if you believe in colorblind, okay, great. But where do those beliefs take you? Right? And then having that kind of conversation. And then oddly enough, I think what's interesting is people resist all kinds of stuff. Even like on my team, if we're changing, okay, hey, we're gonna change this form a little bit. Now we're gonna turn it in here. A new form. Another tab or whatever. And so I see that. It's just a change in because an identity of what you think should happen, needs to happen, or what your expectations are. So that comes out as well. But one of the things I love about my work, and we had this long conversation last week, is we place a lot of emphasis on connection and relationships. We do restorative practices. We talk about how we're coming together as a team. Are you belonging? Do you feel valued? Are you being heard? We had our community circle last week, and everybody was like, "I've never experienced this. I don't know anywhere else that this happens." And for me, it's great because it helps us as a team talk to each other and see how we're feeling and bring that emotional piece. I think the field calls this this idea of humanizing pedagogy, and I think very much in a certain kind of way it's in that direction. So I think all that work comes in when thinking about change, when we're having these conversations about equity and where it shows up in the work, and then within us ourselves as a team when we create spaces to talk about how we're feeling in our development and where we're going. Hope that wasn't too long-winded.
Go ahead.
Awesome. Thanks, Eddie. My question for you is, does your research explore, or if not, what does your research lead you to say about the role of engaging pre-service teachers around culturally competent family engagement? So not just with the way that they interact with their students, but also the family members that are involved in those students' lives as well.
That's a great question. Brilliant question. I haven't come across family engagement. That's not to say it doesn't exist. At least in my research, I haven't found any. What I could say is that service learning, those field experiences are instrumental to their development. So anecdotally, I remember I had one pre-service teacher. She came back. She was placed at the Boys and Girls Club. And we were just talking. And she's like, I was sitting there and she's like, I realized I never thought of myself as teaching Black children. And it wasn't until that experience that sense of racial awareness and that she has a racial identity came to mind. Again, that's a service learning placement. But in terms of engaging the family, I don't know, quite frankly. That's a space I haven't explored. And that's an interesting capacity because, as we talk in our work, a lot of times that's the first thing. A child isn't doing good in school, it's because of the parents. Like that's usually the default, right? And so what is a pre-service teacher's behavior, dispositions, approach once they've had some of these experiences with families where like, hey, someone's working the night shift, the other one's working in the day. We're just trying to piece this thing together. How does that influence now their paradigm and their beliefs about engaging with students? I don't know. I want to believe there is some of that to some extent, but I haven't come across it in a substantial way. But placements are really beneficial. They just take time, articulation, organization, and all the other good stuff. Versus just like dropping someone in.
Hey, there are two really thoughtful questions. Well, some of them have multiple pieces in the comments from yours. I'm not sure that we have time to get into all of this, but maybe you can pick one of these pieces or aspects of each of them. Maybe you could take up.
Okay, yeah, I see the first one is. All right. What recommendation do you have for teachers to sustain emotional maturity? Okay. So, interesting enough, part two of that first question, I think there's a lot of mindfulness coming into the field of education, and I'm blanking on the name of the book title, but something, and I think some of my colleagues at work might help me, but it's the mindfulness of racial justice or something to that effect. And so to that question about being able to sustain the emotional maturity during these times, I think in a certain kind of way the field's heading in that way with that kind of book. I know our educational consultant talks a lot about mindfulness. We have this whole like acronym RAINBOW, and it's first just first recognize your emotions and feelings. Some people don't do that and just barrel through. So I think that's one. But again, in connecting to my study, I think it's making that point that your emotions and your energetic state and your state of being is important as well as your intellectual preparation, and that you're not going to fix the education system yesterday. And if you want to see an impact, we're talking 3 to 5 years here before you really kind of settle into something and seeing the fruit of your labor. So I think that has quite a bit to it. Let me see. I think the next question is about sustainability. I believe there's research in terms of mentoring. That first year, I had quite a few mentors that helped a lot. And getting away from some draconian ways of classroom management and re-emphasizing relationship with your students. The inner work of racial justice. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, the inner work of racial justice. Rhonda McGee. Thank you. I think in a certain extent, the field is recognizing that has to be a component.
I'd say that these questions from our committee members were really good. And certainly I think we could be here a lot longer and they would get a lot of things that the committee members have. But for those of us that have read each of the different articles for Eddie's presentation, we need a couple minutes, more than a couple minutes, to engage with Eddie. And so I would strongly encourage folks to stick around. At some point, Eddie's going to emerge from this breakout room with the committee members, and he'll hang out with y'all for a bit before we join a larger group. But I just wanted to say thank you all for being here, and thank you for such thoughtful and engaging questions. So Eddie, if you could put us in a breakout room, we can keep this going.
Okay. How do I do this? Let me do this. You got it, Naika. So I think I can do this. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna make sure I got this.
And Tanya, are you able to join a room right now?
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'll try this, Eddie, because I'm also a co-host. So I'm going to open the rooms. Nobody else has to do anything. It's just the committee members that will go into a room.
Thank you, Dr. Mo. More than that means he's in the zone, so it's usually the case too. But yeah. And please don't feel pressured to stay on. I know it's like already like we're 2 hours in, so not that I want to kick anybody out, but I don't feel pressure if you're like, yo, I gotta get some rest. I gotta go to work again tomorrow. So
I'm not going to work tomorrow.
Me neither.
Right?
Dios me lo bendiga, bendito que me le dé.
Gracias, Mita.
Millones de gracias le doy a Dios por esa gran felicidad que tiene hoy.
Gracias, Mita. All right.
De seguir adelante, ser hábil.
Gracias, Mita. Gracias. All right.
Dare interrupt, Eddie. So
it's okay. I had to mute. I muted.
Okay. Well, listen. There are a few things that you and I are going to talk about, but it is with so much pleasure that I say congratulations to Dr. Nahara for completing all requirements for his PhD. Eddie, this is a long time coming. We could not be happier for you. In this moment, everybody in the committee thought that the dissertation presentation was great. We thought the kind of nuance and critical thinking that you brought to this work is a real contribution to the field. And the feedback that I have for you will just help to kind of bring some of that out as we get ready for the file. But this is a moment for you to celebrate, and quite obviously with your friends and family. Just congratulations. This is a great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to say a lot, otherwise, you know, the emotions are gonna come out real strong.
Already have tears in my eyes. Great job, Eddie. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Gracias a todos, realmente. I still remember Dr. Sandra Crespo. She instrumental for me getting to Michigan State. She got me my fellowship, me ayudó con mi beca. I still remember you drove me, you had this little car and you were driving me around Okemos. Me estaba enseñando la escuela y todo. And ever since I got to the university, always like, hey, how's it going? What's going on? What's going on? And a care to my progress. Gracias, Sandra. Nunca me voy a olvidar lo que hiciste para mi éxito. Gracias. Tanya, I don't know. So I told the team, I told everybody here that one of your comments was that, Eddie, I was reading your paper and I felt like I was reading you. You were in it. You engaged in it. And I said that, that came because I had a conversation with you. It was my third or fourth year, and you're just like, Eddie, whatever you do, just make sure it's you and make sure you're in that paper and make it your own. And so I think that gave me the confidence and the courage to I was telling them, I have a quote from Buddha in there. You know, I got a pastor, I got Quincy Jones, and, you know, so that conversation helped. And then Dr. Fonal, man, yeah. Conversations, you know, teaching together, just going through all of it, right? Go this way, do this. And a lot of very kind advice. And hey, Eddie, don't think about it this way. This is a conversation. This is for you to engage and learn. Yeah, you know, it's things like that. Sometimes you don't know how far they go. So, thank you.
You throwing me a drink, and so just remember.
Well, perhaps academic advising is also a relational practice, right?
Yeah. Oh, Bernadette and Dolly. So for some of you don't know, behind the scenes, I was getting messages every week. Hey, how's that paper coming? Tell me about that paper, Eddie. I don't think I can say enough. From the start, Bernadette, first year, we started together, Bernadette and I, and she's like, hey, we need to talk. I was like, okay. And hey, again, we need to talk. Finally, we got to talking. And we haven't stopped. We're still owed a peach whiskey night, so that's what we tend to do. We listen to records and listen to and drink peach whiskey. But both Delinda and Bernadette, like, hey, show us your paper, let's read it, give feedback, how's it coming? Just invest in. Y gracias a los dos. Thank you for both of you. It's so, all right. It's just a lot to go around. Hey! Donna just came in to celebrate. So, I think, gracias a todos. Thank you for everyone. It's been a privilege and honor. Thank you for being here tonight. Gracias por estar aquí hoy noche. And sinceramente, honestly, I hope that whatever I share or put forward, it can at least be a seed to whatever growth, understanding, whatever it can benefit others. I hope it does that. And if you ever feel weird, give you a little space to be weird, because there's Eddie, so don't worry about it. So with that, so thank you. I don't know if I have questions. I don't know where we take it from here. Professors, dissertation committee, I'm sure you all have families as well. And it's late.
Eddie, can we do a really quick
everybody smile, and I can do a couple of screenshots for you.
Sure, I would love that.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see if I get my cousin on here. Christian. I don't know if he's even listening right now, but there he is. Hey.
Oh, you gotta take your family off the
Yes.
word.
We have the Zoom.
Oh, good luck on that one, Dolly. Oh, there we go. We got it.
Okay. Ready?
Hold on. Here they're getting ready.
Yep, come forward. There we go. Bring them
Un
forward.
poco más para adelante. That's gonna be tough.
Okay, ready? 1, 2. Let's see. No, we can't.
Oh, maybe you can change that.
Muchísimas gracias a todas esas personas
Thank you to
que
everyone
están acompañando
who are
a
accompanying
mi nieto.
and my
Que
grandson.
Dios me la bendiga.
May God bless you all
Muchísimas gracias a todas.
and much help to everyone. Cool. All right.
Yo no hablo en español, pero te hago la traducción.
But yeah, I'm happy to stick around if everyone wants to chat. Otherwise, I thank everyone for your time this evening. Yeah.
So Eddie, yeah, great job. Let me just say you've been thanking us. It's we said it before, but thank you again for all that you brought to us in this program and to everybody that you touched. Is very clear. You continue to make a big impact on folks. Eddie, I will text you so you and I can find a time to debrief. We can do that tomorrow. There's nothing so important that it has to happen like right now this evening. But if you have time in the morning, let's try to get together. But otherwise, make it a point to celebrate and enjoy the time with the families and the loved ones. Okay?
Thank you, Dr. Flon. I appreciate it.
Of course. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good job, buddy.
Thanks, Isha. I
It was
appreciate
so
it.
nice meeting everybody and seeing everybody.
Okay, how do you feel now?